This is NASCAR Cup Series driver Austin Dillon. Some know him as Richard Childress's grandson, others know him for driving the famous number 3 car, but I know him as NASCAR's Loosest cannon. Over the span of his decade-long career, he's developed into a driver with no regard for the current rules and culture of NASCAR. Whether it's intentionally wrecking someone, spinning himself out in an egregious manner, or any other bizarre scenario that he gets himself into, Dillon has emerged as the most ungovernable driver in the sport. So let's take a few steps into the past and figure out how this all happened. Early in Austin's career, he was pretty tame. He did get into one of the craziest wrecks we've seen at Daytona, but it wasn't at all his fault. For the most part, he kept his head down and worked away to become better, but the chaos tendency was seemingly always there for Dillon. It traces back to before his Cup career. At a nationwide series race at Texas in 2012, Austin Dillon and Denny Hamlin got into a feud. Hamlin nudged Dillon out of the groove in the closing laps, which almost caused Austin to wreck, and he dropped multiple spots as a result. After the race, Dillon showed his displeasure with Hamlin by running into him on the cooldown lap. Denny wasn't having any of it, and shoved Austin back all the way into the inside wall. Looking at this situation, it was quite understandable why Austin responded the way he did, but the choice to ram someone on the cooldown lap is always a bold one, and perhaps Hamlin's response prevented Dillon from trying any more funny business for a handful of years. But this incident would just turn out to be a small fraction of what was to come. Shifting to being an agent of chaos in a more positive manner, Austin Dillon's first win in 2017 was perhaps the definition of chaos. After running on the fringes of the top 10 all day at the Coke 600, a caution with 72 laps to go threw a wrench into the entire race. The leaders, Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr., assumed that 2 stops would be necessary to finish the race. Jimmy Johnson and Austin Dillon thought differently and tried to stretch the entire 70-lap run to the end on 1 tank of fuel. As the laps wound down, it looked increasingly likely that Jimmy Johnson could steal the win with this strategy, but with 2 laps to go, Jimmy ran out of fuel, leaving Dillon his first career win in a race that he never made a proper pass for the lead and only led 2 out of 400 laps. He and his team capped off the celebration with a slide through the grass, now having won a crown jewel race in NASCAR. The next year at the Daytona 500 would be the point in which Austin Dillon's role as a loose cannon would be truly cemented. Austin Dillon led 0 laps on the day. Dillon ran top 20, but nowhere near a winning position until 2 late race cautions changed the entire race. Dillon was able to jump from 13th to 4th by avoiding these crashes, and in his new position had a great shot at the win. He pushed Aric Almirola past the leader Denny Hamlin, but kept pushing Almirola harder and harder until finally Aric spun out and crashed, his chances at a Daytona 500 championship ruined. After this crash, Austin was able to smoothly sail to a victory, bringing back the number 3 car to Daytona 500 victory lane after 20 years. There is still debate over whether or not Dillon purposely wrecked Aric Almirola, but based on Austin's post-race interview, where he says,
"I did what I had to do at the end, hate it for the 10 guys.
I'd say he did it on purpose. This is of course unprecedented. Wrecking someone on purpose for the win is already bad enough, but to do it at Daytona of all places is extremely dangerous, and Austin should have known better, especially given the fact that he almost died at the track 3 years prior. One other thing that he also should have known was to hold off on the dab for his post-race celebration, but some things can never be undone. At the 2019 Summer Daytona race, Austin Dillon ran extremely well all day, leading the most laps of anyone with 46. After winning Stage 2 in clean fashion, tensions began to rise throughout the entire field as rain was in the area, and any lap could be the last lap. Austin Dillon commanded the field, but the moment Clint Bowyer made a move for a pass, Dillon swung down to make an extreme block and instantly wrecked himself in the majority of the field. After practically dominating the race, Dillon basically let his intrusive thoughts win and tried way too hard, and it cost a dozen drivers and teams their race. The result of this crash in the weather, other than the mass destruction, was a bizarre pit strategy which allowed Justin Haley, driving for a no-name at the time organization, to win a race as a part-time rookie. Another out-of-nowhere win would be Austin Dillon's shining accomplishment in 2020. At Texas, Dillon ran decent all day, but not good enough for the win. That was until he stayed out on a strategy call, got a lucky caution, and then made another strategy call to restart on the front row after pit stops. He was able to overtake his teammate Tyler Reddick, who was on the same strategy, then was able to hold off the rest of the field for the remaining 22 laps despite having older tires. These final 20 laps were honestly a masterclass from Dillon, beating his teammate in the field when people were really beginning to doubt his abilities. It seems that when we least expect it, Austin Dillon randomly reminds us that he can be a fantastic Cup Series driver and compete with the best, even if he was helped out by the cautions and low horsepower package in this race. Possibly the dumbest moment of Austin Dillon's career up until this point was slated to occur in 2021. At Michigan, Austin found himself racing with Brad Keselowski at the end of a stage. After successfully passing him for 6th place, instead of slowing down due to the stage end, Dillon drove right up the track instantly, cutting across Keselowski's nose and slamming the outside wall, nearly flipping. Austin completely and unnecessarily ended his own race under caution through this huge wreck, on a day that he had been running fairly well too. Both drivers felt bad after this incident, apologizing on the radio, but the unbounded chaos of Austin Dillon had struck once again. 3 moments of chaos defined Austin's 2022 season. The first was the Coke 600, where the entire race was filled with mayhem from start to finish. A number of late race cautions took out enough drivers and created enough strategy calls to allow Dillon a shot at the win on a late race restart. Dillon, with his 4 fresh tires, amazingly weaved his way 3 wide past Ricky Stenhouse Jr., then right by Denny Hamlin, and another swift 3 wide pass on Ross Chastain and Joey Logano. Within 1 lap, he had made his way from 6th to 1st, but this is when it all crumbled. Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain caught back up and took Dillon and Larson 4 wide. Dillon must have not realized this, and violently crashed into the outside wall multiple times as a result. Just mere seconds from completing what should have been his most impressive lap ever in NASCAR, Dillon cut straight across the entire field and took out several drivers. Austin truly embodies the idea of a roller coaster career, and there were still 2 more baffling incidents to come in 2022. 10 years after the Hamlin incident at Texas, it became apparent that Austin still didn't learn his lesson about hitting competitors' cars while the field was frozen. Under caution in New Hampshire, Dillon came up the track for seemingly no reason whatsoever and hit Brad Keselowski, who then came down the track and ran him off into the grass in retaliation. To this day, it's still unclear what Dillon even hit Brad for here. NBC couldn't find any moment earlier in the race that may have sparked this incident, so perhaps Dillon was just not paying attention and hit Brad. Or maybe it was revenge for the Michigan crash the prior year, even though Austin already acknowledged the crash was his own fault. The last unhinged moment of 2022 would be of great benefit to Austin. At Daytona, Dillon was fortunate to squeeze through an enormous wreck that practically took out the whole field, which started because it was raining and NASCAR didn't realize it in time. With only 10 cars left on the lead lap and 16 laps to go, Dillon was in control, but he lost the lead on the restart. He fought his way back up to second, and once he caught the leader Austin Cindric, he absolutely sent him up the track. Luckily, Cindric was able to save his car, but this maneuver would wind up giving Dillon the win, because Tyler Reddick, who inherited second place, had a damaged car incapable of passing. Austin Dillon had done it again, grabbing a win at Daytona by force, which also locked him into the playoffs and knocked out Martin Truex Jr., who was having a great season despite the lack of wins. It truly is absurd how Austin had done this not once, but twice for a win at Daytona. By the end of 2022, the loose cannon had pulled off the craziest amount of chaos in a single season in his career. In 2023, a pair of incidents involving Dillon were of note. At Gateway, Dillon spun off the nose of Austin Cindric and pinned Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to the wall. The nature of the crash almost looked intentional to many, especially how Dillon seemingly refused to get down and give Stenhouse room. But NASCAR, along with many fans, soon realized that this incident was not malicious and was just coincidental. That said, it was still a bizarre moment, and Dillon seems to be a magnet for these kinds of things. The next big moment would be at Pocono. Early in the race, Dillon would get tagged by the 78. It looked like for a second he might save the car, but then he lost control and hit the wall. Then later in the race, he cut across Tyler Reddick's nose entering turn 1, and hit the wall hard after losing control. After this incident, which was clearly Austin's fault to many fans, Austin waited on track by his destroyed race car and chucked his helmet at Reddick's car, completely missing and instead slapping the asphalt with his equipment. After this, he just awkwardly walked away, leaving everyone at home confused at why he was even that angry at something that was probably his own fault. Where do we even start with the latest incident in 2024 for Austin Dillon? Well, let's look at the entirety of his weekend at Richmond. He led practice and qualified well, which was surprising to us all because of how bad RCR has been this season and Dillon's 32nd place points position. I personally thought, okay, maybe he'll fall off in the actual race, but he didn't. He was in contention all race long, and when crunch time came, he ran the fastest laps and made his way to the lead. As the laps wound down, I thought, wow, this is going to be Austin's first truly impressive win, with a brilliant green flag pass on Denny Hamlin, who is one of the best at Richmond in the closing laps. Then Ricky Stenhouse Jr. brought out the caution, and everything changed. On the ensuing overtime restart, Austin Dillon failed to get a good jump, and Joey Logano took advantage to take the lead. As he was cruising to the finish, Dillon decided that Dynaco was all his and he deserved the win. So he dove into the corner, took out Logano, then Denny Hamlin came to pass Dillon, so he took out Hamlin as well and stole the win in the most unprecedented, ungovernable, chaotic moment in recent NASCAR history. Rightfully, NASCAR finally brought the hammer down and removed Dillon's playoff bid that he would have gotten from the win, but it will always go down in the record books as Austin's 5th victory. Perhaps part of the reason Austin has been so crazy in these scenarios is the encouragement he gets from his grandfather, Richard Childress. While many owners would criticize Austin for being too aggressive, Childress instead says that he is proud of Austin and defends him as innocent.
Pop, pop, proud.
Regardless of what happens next for Austin Dillon, whether he continues his current trajectory of about one win every other year, or if he begins to find a stronger form, there's one quality that will seemingly always remain with him. He is a loose cannon. Thanks for watching, everyone.